Hello and welcome to Essentials, the series where I cover some foundational skills for bug bounty hunters and cybersecurity enthusiasts alike. So in this video, I'm going to talk about networks and proxies, which is a topic that I found particularly difficult when I was getting into bug bounty because it's something quite new and I didn't really know much about networks and computer architecture. So I want to make this video to hopefully clarify issues you may be having with this and kind of an explanation of how modern websites work. And I'm going to be looking closely at two different models of how websites work, which is the older model, the so-called monolith model, and then the new model, which is called the microservice model. Don't worry, I'm going to explain all that today. Well, before I can explain how networks, proxies, and all these things work, I have to explain how, first of all, your computer works. So a computer has 65,536 ports. So you can think of a port like kind of an arm that your computer sticks out, right? So if this is your computer here, the ports on your network are going to kind of be like arms that are going to be kind of sticking out here, right? Kind of like connections, right? Imagine like the whiskers of a cat. It's like each of them has like their own feeling and stuff. And you can get data on each of the different uh, network ports, right? So essentially, you can get a connection on every port. So each port has its individual, it can send out connections and it can receive them. And it's built into your network card actually. So I think in your motherboard, if you have a network card, then you'll be able to create and receive ports, right? So each port on your computer normally has some kind of like identification. Sorry, not each port, but very specific port numbers are used for different reasons, right? For example, let's have a look at port 22, right? Oops, let me circle that better. So port 22 here, right? It's used for secure shell or SSH. So this is basically how we can log into a web server. Other uses, for example, this thing right here, this is used for email. So if you have an email server, that's what this port is for. And the reason the numbers are the same is because when a computer goes to connect to your server, it's going to expect that your login is hosted at port 22. It's sort of a standard that all computers use. So on port 22, all computers expect you to have the secure shell login. And a port is just sort of a spindle, like a kind of like connection set up by your network card, which kind of receives and can interpret data. Okay, so those are kind of the ports. I'm pretty sure these are almost all of them, but there's definitely a lot more, and specific services require specific ports as well. But the two kind of most widely known ones are these two right here. So port 80 and port 443. And these are the two that we're going to be kind of focusing on today. Because these ports are used for HTTP. So HTTP is the way we kind of talk to websites. It's the way we can receive the information that they're giving us, right? So when you click on a website, what happens is your server will send a HTTP request to that server. And it'll say, hey, what kind of information are you storing here? And the server will then respond with usually HTML. HTML is what's used to display the content of a website. So it's all the kind of like buttons. It's like the basically like the UI, the screen. You can click on stuff, you can type. That's all kind of HTTP. And our computer or our browser will expect port 80 or port 443 to be open in order for it to send data. If it's on a different port, then the browser will not be able to connect to the website. It'll say, I didn't find anything here, you know? So that's essentially how that works. That's kind of the foundation of the internet, right? So port 80 and 443 are the most important ones. They're used for the HTTP protocol. The difference between port 80 and 443 is that port 443 is used for HTTPS, which is over kind of more secure connection. It's encrypted. You don't really need to worry about it, but most websites will use 443 because it's safer. So yeah, that's basically HTTP. You can see here. Oops. Let me just get rid of all this first. Right, so here you can see HTTP. You can see HTTPS difference is encrypted. And then HTTP, we can send requests and we can receive a response from the server. Obviously going to port 443, and then we're going to get our response back then. So pretty much how that works. So what is the monolith model, right? So when I talk about ports and your computer, every computer has ports, right? So do servers. And for a server to be a website, it needs to have some kind of website hosted on port 80 or 443, yeah. So one of the HTTP ports, right? So let's say we're a user here, right? And we're going to go to connect to a website. So we're going to ask the server whether it has anything hosted on port 80. And if it does, we're going to say, okay, cool, that's a website. So the server right here, just draw a server. So the server right here is a website because it's giving HTML on port 80. If it doesn't have anything on that port, it's not a website. So to create a website, what we can just do is we can create an application on our server and then tell it to run on port 80. And then we have a single website running on a single server. That's the monolith model basically. Means that we're running one website on one server. Cool. Pretty simple. We just have that running, and now the user can connect to our website, and it's all good, yeah. So, what's the issue with this? Well, because we can only have one service running on one port, that's another thing, you can only have one service on one port at the same time. Well, we can only have one website running on one server. That means we have to bundle the entire website into that port, into that one application. So this is a bit of an issue if you want to have one or more applications running. And as your company grows or your website will grow, you will need to have a larger and larger website. And you might want to add more features, you might want to branch off stuff, you might want to change things. And if everything is running on that one application, it becomes a bit of an issue because you don't really want to have everything bundled. If one thing breaks, the whole website will go down because it's running on one application, right? And especially when you look at security as well, if you have everything running on one kind of server, and it's kind of harder to split data, right? Everything needs to be in one database and everything needs to be together. So if a data leak does happen, it can be a lot more severe than if you have multiple websites that use their own databases, which makes it more secure because we can only leak like one specific kind of database and the rest are kind of safe. So the monolith model is just when we have one website on one server on running on port 80. Nice. So simple enough, right? And yeah, so that's the monolith model. But let's say we want to have two websites running on one server. We can't have two applications running on the same port. So how can we do it? How can we run two websites on one server? That seems impossible, right? The way we do it is with something called a proxy. So a normal proxy, the way it works, so this is a proxy server, sometimes also known as a forward proxy. It will, oops, for God's sake. So it'll intercept the request that we sent through the internet. So if you use something like Burp Suite or Kaido, when you send a request, what it'll do is it'll catch it before it reaches its intended target. Then we can edit, modify, etc. So this captures outgoing requests, basically. It captures outgoing requests. And it catches them before it goes past the internet. And this is mostly for client side. So on your computer, this is mostly what proxies are for. They catch requests that you're sending. However, for web servers, it's a little bit different. And what's normally used is something called a reverse proxy. So you have the forward proxy, which catches outgoing requests, and we have the reverse proxy, which you could probably guess catches incoming requests. So a reverse proxy sits behind the web server, and what it'll do is it'll catch requests that are coming into it. So before the request reaches the server, the reverse proxy will stop it and then do something with them. So these users are going to send the request and they're all going to stop here, and then they'll be redirected back to the web server when the proxy decides to do so. Right. So why do we use this reverse proxy? Why is it actually, how does it allow us to host two websites on one server? Well, let's suppose we have this proxy here sitting on port 80, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to intercept requests coming from HTTP from the user's browser. And let's say we configure this proxy to redirect our requests, right? So what it'll do is it'll route requests. So let's say just we have two websites, right? We have a.example.com, and then we have b.example.com, right? These two websites. And the users will decide which website to go to, and we want to host both of these websites on the same server. Let's say this first one here is I probably shouldn't have, I did a bit wrong. Let's say this one, God's sakes. Let's say this one here is A, and this one here is B, and our reverse proxy is running on port 80. So a user, let's say, decides to go to website A. They go to the internet and their request is stopped in the reverse proxy on port 80 because their browser will always try and connect to the HTTP port, which in this case will be 80. The reverse proxy here will make a decision. I will say, okay, where can we send this request? So the user is looking for A, and I know because I've been programmed by developers that there's a web server at port A. Let's say that this web server is running on a different port. It's running on port 3000. The user can't connect this port because it's not on port 80, and let's say it's behind a firewall or something like that as well. So we'll basically need to find a different way to get to this request. What this reverse proxy will now do is it will send the request that the user sent to the web server, and then it'll receive the response. So the reverse proxy will forward the request, it'll get the response, and it'll send it back to the user. And that's now how we can route the request to different ports. And the reverse proxy will make that decision based on a few things, right? So basically, depending on how the developers programmed the reverse proxy. Sometimes, based on different directories, like an API directory, it'll send it here. It can be on the same website, for example, but we can split directories into different applications, right? So let's just say we have like same thing, port 80 here, and we're running an application here, say on port 4000. And this application is our payment application. Let me just make that a little better. This is our payment application, right? Let's just say we're also running a different application here on port 3000, and this thing is our API. What we can do is if the user, for example, accesses /API here, and then obviously the request keeps going, it's stopped in the reverse proxy. Reverse proxy is like, okay, so I've been configured to redirect all requests in this directory to this application which is running on port 3000. So it does that, and then the request is forwarded, and then the reverse proxy receives the response and then gives it back to the user. And that's one way we can split our website into different applications like this. And that's really the microservice model. Yes, that's basically the microservice model. It's where we basically have the user connecting to a reverse proxy on our server hosted on port 80 and port 443, which then routes the requests to our different applications here, like so. And these applications can be directories like this. They can be different websites entirely. So .api.example.com for example, like that. And yeah, that's pretty much how we can split our application like that. So the microservice model basically is designed to split our one website into many smaller websites. And the advantages of this are basically that instead of having that one massive application, we now have a few smaller ones, which makes it easy to upgrade them. So for example, if we want to like make changes to one of them, like the payment API, then we can just change that one, update it, and then that's it. We don't have to change the whole website. We don't have to do a load of debugging on it, and we can have the whole website stay up while we're doing that. That's good. If something breaks on the API, then the whole website doesn't shut down because it's just that one small service that will go down, but the rest of it will keep going. It's good for stability as well. For security as well, it's good because we can have this payment API routed to its own database. So even it's even more complex behind that, where this thing will probably talk to some kind of database behind it, and basically we can have it be sort of cornered off so that if there's a data leak, then only that information will be leaked and not the information in the whole website. So yeah, that's essentially the microservice model. So just to recap on some of the stuff I talked about in this video. So ports are basically a small kind of connections that our computer can have, our computer and servers and basically any computer out there. And there's 65,536 of them. And some ports have unique standard definitions like port 80 and port 443, which are used for website connections. A proxy is basically something that will intercept your requests, and a forward proxy will intercept outgoing requests, so requests that we're sending to a website, and a reverse proxy will intercept incoming requests. It'll intercept requests on behalf of a website. And what we can then do with the reverse proxy is we can host it on port 80 and 443 to intercept HTTP traffic from browsers. And then we can basically route those requests to different ports and return the request on behalf of the user. And that's how the microservice model works. And the reverse proxy decides what port to route it, depending on what directory we're sending the request to or what website we're sending the request to. Those are the main two things. And I think that's everything I covered in this video. So basically the monolith model is we have one website, one server, everything's routed to the same application. Microservice is many smaller websites on the same server, basically routed by the reverse proxy which sits on the HTTP ports. That's it, and most modern websites will obviously use the microservice model because it's a bit more modern and a bit more stable. Hopefully now you understand how that works, and maybe it'll help you build your own websites or look for vulnerabilities like a misconfigured reverse proxy, which for example routes the request to the wrong website or something like that. So I hope you enjoy this kind of more theoretical video. I didn't have a demo for you today. It's a bit complicated to make it, so I decided to try and explain it more via this kind of PowerPoint kind of style. So let me know if you enjoyed it. But anyways, thanks for watching and happy hunting.